I thought I was part of a loving family until one sentence shattered everything. Last week, I asked my mum what time the family gathering was. She smiled almost casually and said, "Oh, we had it yesterday, without you." My chest tightened. I laughed it off, but my hands trembled. Was this a cruel joke? No. The photos on Facebook told the truth. Everyone smiling, everyone but me. That's when I knew this wasn't an accident. They'd been cutting me out for months, and if they thought I'd stay quiet, they didn't know me at all. I can still smell the cinnamon and pine needles from last Christmas. The living room was glowing under strands of golden fairy lights, the fireplace crackling with an almost cinematic warmth. My mother had insisted on wearing her favourite red sweater, the one with tiny pearls stitched into the collar. She pulled me into a side hug just as my cousin lifted the camera. "Smile, Laura," she said, and for a moment I felt like I belonged. Later, I wandered through the hallway, tracing my fingers along the line of framed family portraits. There was one from years ago, everyone squeezed together in front of the lake cabin. My smile in that picture was wide, but the frame itself was odd. Its bottom right corner was cut off, as if something or someone had been trimmed out. I told myself it was just an old frame that had cracked, but the thought lingered like a splinter. It's funny how the mind works. You notice a detail, dismiss it, and yet it stays, humming in the background. Maybe that's why, when I sat down later that evening and glanced at my phone, the message from the family group chat caught my eye. "Let's do it this weekend." No details, no explanation. I stared at the screen, wondering if they were talking about a barbecue or maybe planning Dad's retirement party. But nobody tagged me, and the conversation quickly went silent when I typed, "What's happening this weekend?" A few days later, I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard hushed voices from the living room. My mother and my sister, Anna, were bent over a notebook. I caught the words guest list and space might be tight. Their heads snapped up when they noticed me. "What are you working on?" I asked. "Nothing important," Mum said too quickly, flipping the notebook shut. Anna smiled without warmth. "You're always busy anyway," she said, her voice sugar-coated but laced with something sharp. I laughed, unsure why my stomach tightened. "Well, if you need help, let me know." "Let me..." Neither of them answered. That night, I told myself not to overthink it. Families have inside jokes, little projects, things that don't always involve everyone. Still, something didn't sit right. The air around me felt curated, like they were staging the version of family they wanted me to see. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a notification from Ben, my younger cousin. It was a screenshot from a chat I didn't recognise. The group's title read "Family Only." At first, I thought maybe it was the regular family group, but as my eyes scanned the list of members, I realised my name wasn't there. The messages scrolled down, plans for this weekend, reminders about who was bringing desserts, discussions about seating arrangements. "Thought you should see this," Ben had typed underneath. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, my heart hammering. My first instinct was disbelief. Maybe it was some side chat for planning surprises. Maybe I'd been accidentally left out. But as I kept reading, I saw lines that made my skin crawl. Anna suggesting to keep it small this year, Mom agreeing that fewer people means less drama. And then my aunt replying with a thumbs up emoji, less drama. I knew exactly what that meant. I closed my eyes, trying to convince myself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe they'd explain. Maybe there was a reason, but in the quiet of my room, the laughter from last Christmas replayed in my head, and I could almost hear the silence beneath it. The silence meant for me. By the time evening fell, I had scrolled through old photos on my phone, noticing little things I'd missed before, the way Anna leaned away from me in group shots, the rare moments when my mother's smile looked forced if I stood too close. I thought of the cut frame in the hallway, and then my phone lit up again. A message from the Real Family group chat. Dinner Sunday night. Just us. Just us. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I sat in the dim glow of my bedroom lamp, staring at the screenshot Ben had sent. My fingers cold despite the blanket over my lap. I didn't know what it was this weekend, but for the first time I was starting to think I wouldn't be invited to find out. It started small, the way erosion begins with just a trickle of water. One weekend, my mother sent me a cheerful photo of the family gathered around the grill in the backyard. Burgers sizzling, my uncle holding a beer, everyone grinning at the camera. "We had a little cookout today," she wrote. "Wish you could have been here." I stared at the screen, confused. Nobody had mentioned a cookout. I typed, "When did you plan this?" But she didn't reply. A week later, another message popped up, this time a snapshot of my sister holding a homemade cake. "Anna baked this for Dad," the caption read. "It was such a nice evening." I hadn't known there was an evening to attend. Still, each time Mum's tone was warm, as if sending me proof that I still belonged. "We're always thinking of you," she wrote once, after a series of pictures from a lakeside picnic I hadn't been invited to. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe these were spur-of-the-moment gatherings. But a pattern began to form, one that I didn't want to admit was real. Each event was framed as an afterthought, the photos like souvenirs from a trip I hadn't taken. I showed a few to Ben over coffee. "That's weird," he said carefully, his eyes shifting away. "What's weird?" I pressed. He shrugged. "It's just, they act like they're including you, but they're not. Never mind." I wanted to push him, but part of me didn't want to hear the answer. When Mum called one evening, her voice was syrupy, sweet. "I know you've been busy, honey. We didn't want to bother you with all the running around, but you know you're always part of the family." Something in her tone felt off, but I laughed anyway, eager to keep the peace. "I appreciate that," I said, though I didn't believe it. It wasn't until one Tuesday night, while scrolling through my feed, that my stomach sank. A notification popped up. "Your mom is live. Ethan's birthday party." My nephew. I clicked immediately. The camera panned across the kitchen, balloons bouncing in the air, Ethan grinning in a paper crown. My sister leaned down to whisper something in his ear, and he laughed. People clapped as Mum brought out a cake covered in superhero figurines. I watched them sing "Happy Birthday." The sound tinny through my phone speaker. No one mentioned my absence. It was as though I didn't exist. I closed the video and sat in the dark, my laptop casting a pale blue glow across the room. My chest felt heavy, my throat tight. The next morning, Ben sent me another message, this one making my pulse quicken. "You need to see this." It was a series of screenshots from the family-only group. In them, Anna was typing, "If Laura comes, she'll just make it awkward like last time." My mother replied with a simple, "Agreed, let's keep it comfortable." There was laughter in the chat, emoji after emoji, as if my exclusion was a punchline. Reading those words felt like a punch to the gut. I had always suspected they spoke about me when I wasn't around, but seeing it laid out in black and white was something else entirely. I wasn't just being left out, I was being used. My absence was the glue that bonded them together, the common enemy that kept them aligned. I thought back to family arguments where I'd been blamed for tensions I didn't start. Mum's favourite line, "If you could just get along with your sister," now felt like a script she'd been rehearsing for years. In that moment, something clicked. I wasn't simply unwanted, I was necessary, but only in my role as the scapegoat. By focusing on my supposed flaws, they never had to look at their own. I sat back in my chair, my heart thudding in my ears. The air in my apartment felt heavier, almost stale. I didn't know what to do with the mix of anger and sadness curling in my chest. Then another notification blinked on my phone. This one wasn't from Ben, it was from an unknown number. There's more to this than you think. No name, no context, just that one sentence, sharp and cold. It was Friday afternoon when I finally picked up the phone and called my mother. I kept my voice light, almost cheerful. "Hey, what time is the family gathering this weekend? I was thinking I could bring dessert." There was a brief pause on the other end, the kind that seems to stretch into minutes. Then her voice came, calm and unhurried. "Oh, we had it yesterday, without you." For a moment, I didn't process the words. My brain refused to match the syllables into meaning. "What?" I asked, laughing a little bit, because surely she had misspoken. "We had it yesterday," she repeated. "Without you." The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the counter, my fingers numb. It wasn't the fact that they'd met without me that had happened before. It was the casual delivery, as if she were telling me the weather. "Why?" My voice cracked, betraying me. There was a rustle on the line, maybe her shifting in her chair. "There's a reason," she said finally, "a good one. I'll tell you when the time is right," but she didn't. She hung up with a quick, "love you," as if those two words could stitch the wound she'd just made. I stood there for a long time after, the phone still in my hand, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly deafening. My chest ached in a way that felt physical, as if something inside me had cracked open. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I curled up on the couch, the curtains drawn, the TV on mute. I must have stared at the same spot on the wall for an hour. The next few days blurred together. I went to work, smiled at students, graded papers, but it was like moving through water. Every evening I came home to silence, letting my phone buzz unanswered on the coffee table. Friends left voicemails, I deleted them without listening. By Wednesday, I had convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, there was some misunderstanding. Maybe they had moved the date last minute and forgot to tell me. It was flimsy, but hope clings hardest when it's dying. Then Ben called. "You should know," he began hesitantly. "They told Aunt Margaret you were sick. Too sick to be around the kids." "What?" My voice rose before I could stop it. "And to Uncle James they said you've been difficult lately. That you'd probably start a fight if you came." He hesitated. "Laura, they're painting you as the problem. To everyone." I felt the heat rise in my face, the burn of humiliation mixing with rage. It wasn't enough for them to leave me out. They had to rewrite the story so that my absence was my fault. I hung up, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. My mind spun with every time I'd defended them to others. Every excuse I'd made for their coldness. And now they were dismantling my reputation piece by piece, using my own family as an audience. I walked to the mirror and stared at my reflection. My eyes were ringed with shadows, my hair dull from neglect. This was what they'd done to me, turned me into someone I barely recognised. If it were you, I wanted to ask the face in the glass, what would you do? Would you swallow it the way I have all these years? Would you wait for the right time they promise will never come? I pressed my palms to the sink, leaning forward until my forehead almost touched the mirror. The silence of the apartment pressed in on me, but beneath it, something else began to stir. Something sharper, heavier than grief. The breaking point didn't come with a scream or a slammed door. It arrived quietly, like a match being struck in the dark. I was scrolling on my phone one night, sleepless and hollow, when a headline caught my eye. Scapegoat Child Syndrome, the invisible role in dysfunctional families. I clicked. The article unfolded like it had been written for me. Bullet points about being blamed for problems you didn't cause, being excluded from family milestones, having your successes ignored while your mistakes were magnified. I read about the cycle, how the scapegoat's mistreatment bonds the rest of the family together, how they rewrite history to keep the role intact. My chest tightened with every sentence. By the end, I was sitting on the edge of my bed, the phone trembling in my hands. This wasn't random. It wasn't just bad luck or misunderstandings. I had been living in this role my entire life. From childhood tantrums, I didn't start to teenage rebellions that were really just me trying to breathe. I thought of Christmases where I was left out of gift exchanges, of birthdays when my mother would forget to bake a cake. Every memory slotted neatly into the pattern, and something in me snapped. The grief that had been crushing me for weeks shifted, hardening into something sharper. Rage, not the wild, reckless kind, but a steady, burning anger that hummed with clarity. That night, I called Ben. "I know what's going on," I told him, my voice steadier than I felt. He sighed. "I've been waiting for you to say that." There was a pause, then his voice dropped. "Laura, you should know it wasn't just Mom's idea. It was Anna. She told everyone she didn't want you there because you'd make things uncomfortable." Mum agreed immediately. For a moment I couldn't speak. My own sister, the one I'd defended countless times, the one I'd comforted when her marriage fell apart, had led the charge to erase me from the family. "Why?" I whispered. "I think she needs you gone so she can be the hero," Ben said. "If you're not there, she's the one who looks good. No competition, no friction." It was almost laughable, the irony of being treated as a threat while being labelled a burden. But beneath that irony was something raw and cutting, a betrayal so deep it felt like a physical wound. "Thanks for telling me," I said finally, "but this ends now." For the next few days I worked quietly. I combed through old text threads, screenshotting every conversation that hinted at my exclusion. I saved Ben's images from the family-only group, complete with timestamps. I went back through voicemails, including one where Mum said, "You're always welcome as long as you behave." I even pulled up emails from years ago, subtle jabs dressed as jokes, proof that this had been happening for far longer than I'd admitted. Each piece of evidence felt like a brick in the wall I was building between us, but I wasn't going to just disappear. I wanted them to know exactly why I was walking away. One night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook, drafting what I half-jokingly called my no-contact plan. Step 1, stop initiating any communication. Step 2, prepare a controlled, final confrontation in front of an audience, big enough that they couldn't twist the story afterward. Step 3, walk away without looking back. I chose my battleground carefully. A large family reunion was coming up. One of the few events big enough to pull in relatives from other states. It was the perfect stage. As the date approached, my anxiety built alongside my resolve. I imagined their faces when I laid out the truth. I pictured Anna's confident smile cracking, Mum's eyes narrowing, the ripple of whispers through the room. And for the first time in weeks, I felt powerful. Then, 2 nights before the reunion, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Don't trust everything you think you know. I stared at the message, my fingers frozen over the screen. There was no name, no clue who had sent it. Just that one line, as if someone was reaching through the dark to grab my wrist before I stepped off a ledge. Was it a warning? A threat? Or was someone trying to protect me? I typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. I set the phone down, my mind racing. If Anna and Mom were the obvious enemies, did that mean someone else was pulling strings behind the scenes? Or was this just another manipulation to make me doubt myself again? The thought lodged itself in my chest like a stone. If there was more to the story, I needed to find it before I confronted them. But the clock was ticking, and the reunion was only 48 hours away. The reunion was held in the community hall, a space big enough to hold every branch of the sprawling family tree. Folding chairs lined the walls, tables groaned under the weight of casseroles and pies, and a low hum of conversation filled the air. I walked in with my laptop bag slung over my shoulder, feeling the eyes that followed me. Anna stood near the refreshment table, wearing a fitted navy dress and that same polished smile she always used for public gatherings. Mum was beside her, greeting relatives like a benevolent queen. Neither of them looked at me. I forced myself to mingle for the first 30 minutes, shaking hands, smiling politely. My heart pounded under the weight of what I was about to do. When most people had eaten and settled into chairs, I cleared my throat. "Excuse me," I called out. The room quieted, heads turning toward me. "I have something to share. It won't take long." A few curious murmurs rippled through the crowd. I walked to the front of the room and set my laptop on the small table reserved for the DJ. With a click, the projector screen lit up behind me. The first slide was a screenshot from the family-only chat. Anna's words glowing in white on black. "If Laura comes, she'll just make it awkward like last time." Gasps whispered through the room. I clicked again. More screenshots. Mum agreeing to keep it comfortable. Messages about not inviting me to Ethan's birthday. Photos from events I hadn't known existed. Each slide a nail in the coffin of their misunderstanding narrative. "This is what's been happening for months," I said, my voice steady. "I wasn't too busy. I wasn't invited. And when I asked why, I was lied to. I was told there was a reason. But the reason was that my presence wasn't convenient." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the projector. Then from the back, Aunt Margaret stood. "Laura's not the only one," she said, her voice sharp. "They did the same to me 3 years ago, stopped inviting me after I called out Anna for cutting in line for the inheritance." A murmur spread through the crowd. Uncle James added, "And me, when I wouldn't co-sign on that loan." It was like a dam breaking. People who had been silent for years began speaking up, one after another, each story adding weight to the pile of grievances. I glanced at Anna. Her smile had frozen into something brittle. Mom's face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Is this really necessary?" Anna's voice cut through the noise, high and tight. "You're just trying to humiliate us." I turned to her. "No, I'm showing everyone what you've been doing. You've spent years pretending to be the glue holding this family together, but you've been cutting people out to make yourself look better." Mum finally spoke, her tone sharp. "Don't blame your sister for everything. I made those decisions too." The air between them crackled, a visible fissure forming in their united front. And then came the twist I hadn't planned for. Uncle Robert, who had been leaning against the wall, crossed his arms. "Since we're laying things out, maybe someone should mention the money." Anna's head snapped toward him. "What money?" Robert's gaze shifted to me. "Your mum used part of your inheritance, Laura, the money your dad left you, to help Anna with her down payment on that house." The words landed like a blow. "What?" My voice barely rose above a whisper. Mum's face flushed. "It was a loan. It was never paid back," Robert interrupted. "I saw the paperwork. You signed it over as a gift." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Of all the things I'd expected to hear today, this wasn't one of them. The betrayal was almost too big to process. Months of emotional exile now braided with financial theft. Anna opened her mouth to speak, but the room had shifted. The murmurs were no longer background noise. They were sharp, judgmental, slicing through the air. I closed my laptop slowly, the click of it shutting louder than the voices around me. "I think we're done here." Mum took a step forward. "Laura, we can talk about this." "No," I said, my voice calm but final. "You've been talking for years. I'm done listening." I slung my bag over my shoulder and walked toward the door. As I reached the threshold, I stopped and turned back just enough for my voice to carry. "This is just the beginning." Then I stepped outside into the cool evening air, the door closing behind me with a satisfying thud. In the weeks after the reunion, I heard the ripples before I saw them. Texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years trickled in, some short and stiff, others long and apologetic. Aunt Margaret called to say Anna had stopped speaking to Mom after the inheritance revelation. Ben told me the family group chats had splintered into smaller factions, each one blaming the other for what happened. Without their scapegoat, they'd turned on each other. Every petty grievance, every simmering resentment rose to the surface. It was almost poetic, like watching a fire burn itself out because there's nothing left to consume. I didn't intervene. I didn't need to. Sometimes late at night, I'd picture them sitting in the same living rooms where I'd once been ignored, now circling each other like wary animals. I imagined the silence between them, heavy with all the things they could no longer pretend weren't true. And then I'd close my eyes and let the image fade. I wasn't going back. Instead, I started building something new. Coffee dates with colleagues who'd become friends. Weekly dinners with neighbours who laughed easily and asked how my day was without any hidden edge in their voices. I joined an online community for people who'd cut ties with toxic families. And for the first time, I felt understood in a way that didn't require me to explain or defend myself. The loneliness I'd feared never came. In its place was a quiet contentment, the kind that grows when you stop chasing approval that will never come. One rainy afternoon, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox. The handwriting on the front stopped me cold. It was from Uncle James, who had once been one of my harshest critics. Inside was a single page, folded neatly. "Laura," it began, "I owe you an apology. I believed things about you that weren't true, and I never questioned the source. I see now how I let myself be influenced. I'm sorry for every time I looked the other way. You didn't deserve it." At the bottom he'd written, "I hope you find peace. You've earned it." I read it twice before setting it down. The words didn't erase the past, but they were a reminder that the truth has a way of surfacing, even if it takes years. That evening, I stood by my front door, watching the last streaks of daylight stretch across the floor. I opened the door and let the cool breeze in, the scent of rain still lingering in the air. Somewhere behind me, my phone buzzed with another message. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. I stepped outside, letting the sunlight warm my face. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not because I'd won, but because I was free.